everybody, and welcome to Parks Bros. It's Drew here, and today we're going to be flying at the speed of fear over at Six Flags Magic Mountain as I go full and in-depth on my review of Tatsu, the B&M flying coaster. Tatsu, or Flying Beast in Japanese, is a B&M flying coaster that is still the tallest of its kind in the world. Now, this coaster model is unlike most in the fact that during the ride experience, you lay down head first and fly like you're Superman through the air. Now, even 5 feet off the ground, this experience is quite extreme, but there's something absolutely breathtaking about this magnificent coaster, and that's the fact that the top height is 170 feet into the air. So I would say don't look down, but guess what? There's nowhere else to look. Beside that amazing height for this style of coaster, it does have a 111-foot drop and a top speed of 62 miles per hour. Tatsu also includes 4 different inversions, one of which is still a world record breaking inversion. The amazing 124-foot tall pretzel loop, which is still the world's biggest. And to round out all of these facts, it does have a length of 3,602 feet, which will give you about a minute-long experience from the end of the chain lift to the beginning of the final brake run. But with all the facts out of the way about this terrifying beast, let's figure out how to get there. So once you've entered into Six Flags Magic Mountain in Valencia, California, you're going to want to take a right immediately and head toward a fountain. Now, from this point, there are 3 different ways you can get to this ride, but they all start with a left turn at that front entrance fountain. The first of which, you'll follow the main path on the left-hand side, which will loop around past coasters like X2 and Viper before you snake your way all the way up near the top of Samurai Summit to find the entrance sign. Now, the second way to do this is just using a shortcut to take the same route, and this shortcut can be found in the exit space for the New Revolution, which you'll come across quite quickly after passing the Grand American Carousel. But that exit path will lead to some stairs, which take you to that main path, while saving you a couple minutes of time. Now, the third and final route is technically the shortest in overall walking distance, with a good half of it leaving you standing completely still, but it does feature by far the most amount of stairs. So do keep that in mind if stairs can be a little tough. But on that main pathway, right before you get to New Revolution, there will be this ride called the Helpful Honda Express, which will use a cable to bring you all the way to the top of Samurai Summit. And once you have finished your ride on the Helpful Honda Express and saved your breath for the many stairs later, you're going to want to take a left-hand turn almost 180 degrees as you bypass Ninja. This will lead to a set of stairs that head toward Tatsu's station building before you turn right, left, and then right again to head to some more stairs, and then at that point, you'll want to take another 180-degree left turn and you'll find yourself at the entrance sign. Now, speaking of this beautiful entrance sign, it does feature a dragon and some really iconic lettering, and I gotta say, it's one of my favorite signs in the park. But immediately after you walk under this awesome looking sign, you'll find yourself in a heck of a lot of switchbacks, which if completely filled can add up to a lengthy wait of over an hour in just that section of the queue. But at least there is this nice shade structure above you at all times. Now, while this shade structure does protect from direct sunlight, it can get a little toasty underneath, especially when you're waiting a heck of a long time for this ride. But once you've made your way out of that giant switchback section, you'll find yourself going up one of 2 staircases to get to one of 2 stations on this coaster. Now, don't worry about which side you're going on. It features the exact same ride on either side. There being 2 working stations, though, can just help with ridership per hour and get more and more people riding in a quicker amount of time. Now, of course, once you take the many stairs up to the main station building, you'll notice that the station is completely shaded, which is great, but it is quite bare bones. And the only noticeable theming elements of this ride besides the main sign really is the roofing from the outside of the station, which does take on that Japanese style. But if you're wondering of a way to get to this coaster without stairs, there is a ramp as well as an elevator that you'll need to take, which you can find if you go to the right side of that entrance sign past some lockers, and this is the main exit pathway for this coaster. But if you end up taking this path, you'll eventually see a photo kiosk where you can buy your on-ride photo, and in this area, the elevator is featured for you to use if you have an eligible ADA pass. But since we've made our way into this station, let's take our seats. So once those gates open up for you to ride, you can put all of your belongings on some shelves in the middle of the 2 station platforms before taking your seat. Now, once you take your seat, you'll pretty much feel like this is just a more enclosed B&M coaster. Now, other B&Ms at Magic Mountain include Batman the Ride, Riddler's Revenge, and Scream. Now, all of these rides have very similar setups in seating as well as restraints. Now, Tatsu is the black sheep of the bunch because it does feel a little tighter, especially around the sides of your body. But here's the main differences. The back head pad is an actual pad, which can lead to a more comfortable experience, especially if you're banging your head onto the seat. But the biggest difference overall is the restraint system, which is not just a typical over-the-shoulder restraint, it is a full vest restraint. So once you pull it down, you'll notice that the thickest part of this restraint is on the lap, and it's a fully functioning lap bar. Now, coming from this lap bar, though, is a giant vest pad of sorts that covers the remainder of your torso and holds you snugly in place. Now, while sitting upright, this restraint can be a little weird, but once you get into that flying position a little later on, it feels almost like second nature, and you won't really need to worry about a thing. But beside that, there is a leg restraint, so make sure to keep your legs back, so when a ride operator or team member comes by to check your restraints, they can kick a little switch that will keep your legs secure from your shins. Now, of course, once your restraints are all done up, you'll experience the flying beast, Tatsu, in its full. Out of nowhere, you'll go from a basic sitting position to almost doing a half front flip to where you're parallel with the ground. Now, if you're not used to this feeling, it is very daunting at first and can definitely be startling for a first-time rider. It really does feel weird once you get going. But before you know it, you'll hear that classic call-out sign for the ride's namesake, and you'll be heading out toward the lift hill. Now, while you're still getting used to that weird flying position, you'll end up heading up the start of this 170-foot tall lift hill. Now, at first, it's not too bad. You do feel a little scared with the position you're in because it's a really weird feeling for humans. I mean, heck, we're not used to flying unless we're in a big tin can in the sky. And to be in the position like Superman is really unlike anything else. But something that's rather comforting is the fact that there's a bunch of trees below you, at least for the first half to 2/3 of this lift hill. But before you know it, those trees disappear, and you'll be looking straight down towards a pathway underneath you with what looks to be ants all the way on the ground. Now, those aren't ants. Those are people waving up at you and smiling, while you probably look at them in terror, or if you're like me, after many rides, you'll be smiling right back. But if you don't want to look at the ground, make sure to look straight up and you'll get a beautiful view of all of the surrounding hills and mountains, as well as a little bit of a view of the park's raft ride, Roaring Rapids. But then immediately after, you're going to whip to the right for the first drop of this amazing coaster. Now, this is where it all starts to set in. Your anxiety and that scaredness kind of goes away a little bit with the first drop, at least for me. That lift hill is really just insane to me still, but the moment we hit that drop, I know I'm going to have an amazing time. But this drop turns into a right banking turn and into the first inversion of the ride, which is a 103-foot tall corkscrew element, which leaves you floating in midair. At least it feels like it. But immediately after, you'll be getting amazing views of the park as well as the rest of the ride before you hit a 96-foot tall zero-G roll, another element where you're definitely going to feel like you're floating. This, of course, is before you make a quick right bank turn, which will push you up against that vest restraint as well as lap bar due to the high positive G-forces. Now, immediately after this, you'll notice the camera on the ride, which is definitely where you want to pose. And some of the pictures on this ride have been amazing. Now, immediately following that, you'll be banked quickly to the left in an overbank turn, which I think is a really cool element, especially in the back row, before you get to the most insane part of this coaster, if not the most insane part of any coaster at Magic Mountain. This is the 124-foot tall pretzel loop, which is unlike anything on a coaster that you have probably ever experienced. At least if you haven't been on a flying coaster before. Now, this element quite literally puts you through a front flip while giving you an amazing view of X2, Viper, the front entrance area, as well as many things off in the distance before you hit extreme G-forces for a sustained amount of time. And don't be surprised if it feels like your face is melting, because that's what I always get on this element. It always feels like my face is stretching to the point where I am melting as a human being. And not to mention, I frequently gray out on this element because it is probably the most intense of all of the inversions at Six Flags Magic Mountain. But this ride goes from a graceful, fun experience to a rather intense one in the blink of an eye, and is really hard to comprehend a lot of the time. Now, I will say a downside to this element, at least on some days, is there is a little bit of shaking going on at the very bottom of the pretzel loop. Now, of course, this is not happening all the time, at least for the rides that I've gotten, because sometimes Tatsu has been the smoothest B&M I've ever been on, and that's most likely the case a good 90% of the time I've ridden it. But there are a few occasions where you might shake back and forth a little bit, and it can add to that disorienting feeling, especially with the major amount of G-forces that are applied at the very bottom of that element. And of course, the pretzel loop being the most intense element can leave some people with a little bit of a headache after they ride this one. But soon after, you'll make a left banking turn before feeling zero G yet again with an inline twist before you whip around next to the full throttle plaza and the front entrance fountain with a really intense right banking turn, which always freaks me out a little bit, especially with how high in the air it is. And while it seems like you're not too high in some section of this ride, if you were to take out the mountain entirely, it would be a completely different experience. Because Tatsu, in essence, really is a terrain coaster. But after that right banking turn, you'll head into kind of the mid-course brake run before taking a quick dip to the left and hitting those final brakes. Now, hopefully before long, you'll end up back in one of the stations and you'll head off of Tatsu. But don't be surprised if you do wait on the final brake run for quite a bit of time due to the complicated loading process of these very complicated trains. But with that, your ride on Tatsu is over. So immediately after your reset and your blood flows all the way back to your feet again, you'll grab your belongings, head down the stairs or the elevator, and find yourself on that exit pathway. Now, boy, oh boy, Tatsu is just an incredible feat of engineering. The way it weaves around the top of Magic Mountain, as well as taking on that insane height and intensity, it is just unparalleled, at least in all of California. Now, I gotta be honest with you. There are some days where I have legitimately thought that Tatsu was my favorite roller coaster at Magic Mountain. There was one ride in particular I don't think I'll ever forget, and that was during Fright Fest at 2 a.m. and it was still over 100 degrees out. This was by far the smoothest it was running for me. And of course, with it being Fright Fest, all of the fire and fog effects as well as lighting all around the park made the ride an absolute fever dream almost, but the good kind, of course. Another standout season to ride this coaster is definitely during Holiday in the Park, because especially right before that pretzel loop, Magic Mountain likes to do up all of their lights in the front entrance plaza, and you get an absolutely astounding view of all the beautiful and hard work that the team members put into that every year. And not to mention overlooking views of places like Metropolis on the opposite side of the park. But man, as much as I love Tatsu, I do wish it had one more element, or potentially finished with the pretzel loop, because to be frank, those last couple elements after the pretzel loop, I'm always just trying to figure out what the heck is going on, and I can never really take those elements in to the full effect, because I'm still quite disoriented. But along with that, a little bit of the roughness over the years at the very bottom of the pretzel loop does take away from that element as well. And I gotta be honest, a lot of the ride experience does depend on that single element, which does kind of stink. Because some rides, it can be by far the best element, and then some rides, at least for me, it can be one of my least favorites on the coaster. Now, of course, that element on the ride is really undeniable, and the fact that it is the most iconic part of this coaster, but it can be quite divisive for many riders. But with that said, I think this is by far one of my favorite coasters of all time, and is without a doubt in my top 3 at Magic Mountain overall, and some days will definitely take the cake as number 1 for its astounding terrain interaction, as well as really graceful layout, and of course, its unique ride. But with that said, let's move on to my ratings of this coaster. And if you didn't know, I have a little bit of an unorthodox rating system. I start off with a ski slope rating saying how experienced a coaster rider you should be before checking out the certain coaster, a star rating for fun and intensity, and of course an overall score out of 10. Now for the ski slope rating, I definitely gotta give this 2 black diamonds, meaning that you should be a very experienced coaster rider before checking this amazing ride out, because it is ridiculously intense. And of course, it being ridiculously tall as well can scare a lot of people off, so you gotta be prepared for that before taking Tatsu on. And for an intensity rating out of 5 stars, this is by far one of the easiest decisions I've ever made with this rating. It's a 5-star intensity rating. Just for that pretzel loop, as well as some of those bank turns are amazingly forceful as well, but this ride easily gets a 5-star intensity rating in my book. But for fun, I give it a 3-star rating, because a majority of that layout is just super graceful and tranquil even, and for lack of a better word, can make you feel zen. Now, for an overall score out of 10, this one has left me a little heartbroken because I want to give it a perfect 10, but I think I'm going to say, at least for this review, a 9 out of 10. Just because, at least for me, it really depends on how I'm feeling that day, but I do potentially wish it was a tiny bit longer, with maybe one more element, but that's if I get really picky. I do really adore this ride, and it's easily one of my favorites in California, and boy, I can't wait to get back on it, to feel extremely terrified, completely tranquil, like my face is melting off, and then utterly confused at the end of all of it. Because if you had to split Tatsu into 4 sections, that's what it definitely would be for me. But what do you guys think of Tatsu? Please let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts. Do you love it? Do you hate it? And what's your favorite element? Let me know. But I want to say thank you so much for watching. It means the absolute world, and if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe, because we're going to have more reviews like this coming in the near future. Thank you again so much for watching, but until next time, we'll see you on the next ride.